Hey everyone, this is David Pike, the Motorcity Mechanic. I've got another video for you today on a Cummins 6.7 liter diesel. We're going to be dealing with check engine light code P0471, exhaust gas pressure sensor performance. Check it out. As you've already noticed, the environment's a little bit different today. We're at the house doing a filming on how to repair that code. No work shirt, leisure wear I guess, it's casual Sunday. I've also got gloves on. I usually don't wear gloves, but when I'm at home I don't have the wonderful hand cleaner I've got at the shop to get the grease off. But nonetheless, P0471. I don't see the code a lot, but I do see the code, and a lot of the times the fix is fairly simple, doesn't require any parts. It just takes a few minutes to look it over and see what the possible location of the restriction is. And what you usually find is there's some carbon buildup. They say you can get it inside the tube that goes from the manifold to the pressure sensor, but what I usually see is the housing that the pressure sensor mounts to. Right in there I can see the port get clogged up from time to time, and that's usually where I find it, and that's where I usually end up having to clean it. And as of so far, I haven't had to put the sensor on. That's the three possible causes for the code per the service manual: sensor, the mounting fixture that it goes on being clogged, as well as the tube being clogged. So we'll go step by step, checking each one, ruling out whether or not we're going to need a pressure sensor just by checking two. It's just elimination. If you can figure two of them are good, then you know it's the third. So here we go. Now the location for your exhaust pressure sensor is right here at the front of the engine. This is a 2007, that's its location. I do know for example 2015s, they did move them closer back to the EGR cooler, but nonetheless near the exhaust manifold. On a 2007, it is up front. It's not too far from where the upper radiator hose and thermostat housing is. And there's actually a tube that runs from the exhaust manifold over to the mount here that it's made into, so that the exhaust pressure sensor can get direct access to the manifold. So it doesn't screw into the exhaust manifold, it's remote located and has a pipe going to it. Now when they did move it closer to the actual manifold, they did away with the pipe on the newer models. Nonetheless, here's your location. Now the way it operates is basically the same way as an oil pressure sending unit. In appearance, it's identical. It's got the same kind of socket that's needed to remove it, and basically not only does an oil pressure unit check oil pressure, an exhaust pressure sensor detects exhaust pressure. So it's just a basic pressure sensor. It's just remotely located, and it gets away from a lot of the heat that builds up from the exhaust, so that way it has a chance to get a little bit more cooler exhaust getting to it. But here's the location, and now what we'll do is we'll work on getting the connector off and getting the sensor off. Now the connector for this exhaust pressure sensor has what I call the two-stage lock. Now if you see enough of my videos, you've heard me mention it and you've had me show you what I'm speaking of. Now for those who've never seen it before, the two-stage lock is you've got a primary lock which actually keeps the connector locked onto the sensor. And we got a secondary lock that actually keeps it locked so that the primary lock can't be released. It's kind of a redundancy. From time to time they do away with the secondary lock. Nonetheless, this one has it. So before you can release the connector, you can squeeze all day long here on the top, which is your primary lock. Nothing's going to happen. We need to move further down. On this one, there's a red lock. Right now what I've got to do is I've got to push in on one side. As I push on one side, it becomes flush and the other portion comes out. That lets me know that this lock has been released. Now I can actually squeeze in on the primary lock. And once I squeeze in on the primary lock, I can then lift up. And there we go. So a little closer look. Here's your secondary lock. As you can see, as I'm spreading it in, that's all the way there. That prevents me from squeezing in on the primary lock to get released. But to release this one, you have to press in on one side. And I just use a screwdriver, because sometimes they stay stuck in there because they haven't been moved since the day they've been put on. But that's how you release that. That way you can squeeze in on the lock and pull it off. So now we can get access to the sensor. The sensor itself, like I said before, is basically the same appearance as an oil pressure sensing unit, which means you're going to have the special socket. Socket has 6 flat areas and rounded corners. A typical socket will not work. You just get your old pressure sealing unit socket, slide it down on there, make sure it's fully seated. Let's go ahead and start backing off. There we go, now we've got it out of the way. That's it. One thing we want to do is when we're looking at it, we want to make sure that the port's free of debris. If we need to get in there and blow it out, so be it. Get some compressed air, blow it off, wipe it off, and get it clean. Now, I haven't physically had to replace one of these yet. I've removed them, yes, but replacing, no, because the problem hasn't been with the sensor each time I've checked it. It's because the port down in there has a buildup of either carbon, soot, all kinds of stuff like that, and I've had to clean it. So that's what we're going to be working on today. Now we need to loosen up the pipe that goes into the mount that the exhaust pressure sensor went on, because we want to make sure that the passage is clear. The pipe itself is held on a 12mm fitting. Alright, so we back off to 12mm. Now, depending on your vehicle, what you're going to find is one of a couple things. There's either going to be a 15mm nut down here on this exhaust manifold stud, or there's not. If there isn't one, don't worry, they didn't put it there for a reason. Now mine does have one. I will have to take that nut off in order to give me enough flex to get the pipe out. That way when I go to line it back up, I'm not having to tweak it or bend it. I can probably hopefully get it up in there and tighten down on the fitting. So I'm going to work on backing off this 12mm fitting, and then I'm going to get down in here for socket and take that 15mm nut off. Nuts out of the way. I backed off the 12mm fit, and I can actually pull it out very easily. Now I'd want to do a few things. I want to lift it up slightly or go down, it doesn't matter. I want to be able to access the port that it goes into. I want to use a flashlight from up above. I'm going to use a pick from the down below. I'm going to kind of poke myself through, so when I look down inside the port, I can see the pick. I know that everything's good, then I can blow it out. But like I said, what you'll find from time to time is you'll have a buildup in here, so that the pressure sensor doesn't actually get a reading or an accurate reading. Sometimes the buildup gets hard enough that I actually get a drill bit and have to go in there with a small drill bit to open up the port again, because this thing got so built up with carbon. So that's what we'll do on this one. We'll get us a pick up in there and we'll try to work it and then look at it with the flashlight. So I've got a pick where the pipe went in, that fitting went into the mounting, and as you see down here, this is where the pressure sensor went. I'm going to shove my pick through here so I can make sure the port is free. And make sure you clean it out, make sure you're getting big pieces out. Get that port completely clean, and once it's clean, you're going to need to blow it out. Just get some compressed air and blow whatever sits in here out. And then you also can fire up the engine and see if you got any pressure coming out of the tube as well. We'll check that out. Now when you go back with that exhaust pressure sensor, you're going to torque it down. Once you get, I want to get it snug first, but then what I'm going to do is I'm going to torque it down. Now your torque is actually going to be 13 foot-pounds. So the actual torque for the sensor, I'm going to come back in a second and torque it, will be 13 foot-pounds. Now I'm reinstalling it. Once I've got it torqued down, I'm going to hook the connector back up and slide the secondary lock in place. And then what I want to do is I want to make sure I got flow coming out the tube before I put the tube back on, because there's only 3 possible reasons for this code. You got a problem with the exhaust pressure sensor, you've got debris inside the mounting here that we showed by putting the pick through it, or you've got a tube that goes from the exhaust manifold over to it. The feed tube is actually clogged, so that'd be the last thing we check. Now I've got the sensor mounted, I've got the connector back in place, and like I said, I want to check the flow coming out the tube. Now the reason why I went ahead and put the sensor back in and the connector is because of I don't have a check engine light on currently, but if I fire the engine up with that connector unplugged, I'm going to have a check engine light. Then I've got to worry about clearing it. Now if you've already got the code, the light's already on, that's fine. You can leave this out while you're checking everything. Because the code's already there. You're going to have to clear it no matter what. But for the sake of argument, I don't have a light on now, so I'm going to leave it connected so that I don't have a light. Now, you would fire up the engine, Like I said, you want to grab the tube, put your hand over the end or your finger, and you want to feel something blowing out. There should be flow. You should have exhaust pressure coming out. I could try it right now, fire it up, but between the sound of the engine being so loud, and it's kind of hard to show you pressure visually. So you want to make sure something's blowing out. If you've got flow coming out, awesome. If you don't, then you need to go further back where it goes onto the manifold, take it loose, blow it out, clean it out, soak it, whatever you need to do. Otherwise, what I've normally seen is the clog happens here where the pressure sensor goes. So we verified the port's clean now. We've also verified we got flow coming out the tube. So now, as you always hear me say, installation is the opposite of removal. We need to go ahead and get the tube down in here, thread the 12mm fitting back in place. I'm going to put the nut back on my mount right here. Yours may or may not have one. And then if you got any codes, go ahead and clear them. Because if you found any kind of blockage, you know that's what's going to be the problem. If you didn't find any kind of blockage, then you go on and you replace that exhaust pressure sensor. So like I said, there's 3 possible codes for that P0471. And that's what they are. So at this point, I appreciate any kind of thumbs up on YouTube. Don't forget to like me on Facebook. You can follow me on Twitter, and you can check me out on Instagram as well. If you got any comments, suggestions about this particular video or anything Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, or Ram related, please feel free to email me at david@motorcitymechanic.com, and I'll try to get back to you in a timely manner. In the meantime, keep checking out these videos.